Hello and welcome. This I think we are live now, right? Hello and welcome to wealthlessons.club. I got confused a little bit because I got a prompt here that this is not going to be saving. That's why there is a fumble when I began. But hey, welcome to wealthlessons.club, a podcast channel where we talk to accomplished individuals from all over the world and learn from them the secrets to their success. Today, I have with me Suresh Krishna Madhuvarsu. Suresh is somebody that I have known for the past several years now. He's very special to me. Of course, we don't keep in touch often. We are busy in our own lives, but he's so special and the reason is he has been a guide and mentor during my early transition days into product management. Suresh, you would remember, right? I was still in Singapore.
Absolutely.
On weekends, in the mornings for me and evenings for him, he would teach me product management as part of a mentorship program. And I cannot thank enough because I have to remember. Sometimes we forget what people have done to you, and those lessons and those mentorship helped me actually to transition to my product management career. And then eventually I moved from product owner to product manager to senior product manager. Today I'm heading product management with a team of product managers and UX. And I cannot thank him enough for that early start he gave to my career. And then a few years later I had him on my podcast, which was an audio only podcast, where he was the director at Oracle at that time, and it was a great conversation. And then over the years I saw him evolve into playing a more proactive role in startups. Today he's co-creating early stage startups with world class founders and leadership teams. Some of the startups include Sales Table, Sensai, Sense, Go-To-Marketeer, Noema Systems, and several stealth mode startups. He has driven 7 end-to-end enterprise SaaS and mobile products, has scaled to more than $100 million revenue in 5 years, and has overseen 3 acquisitions by Oracle and Software AG. His expertise is to build 0 to 1 companies. That means companies that don't exist, and then he builds them. So today he's the co-founder and partner at Product 10x, 3 times co-founder, product builder. He's the co-founder at Sales Table AI, general partner at P10x Ventures, co-founder partner at P10x Accelerator. We'll try to understand what the difference is between a venture and an accelerator. And he's a startup mentor at New Chip Accelerator. So with that, welcome Suresh to Wealth Lessons. How are you doing today?
Hey, first of all, Ravi, it's so pleasure to meet you, and I'm sure the audience over here. I'll say this: I think Ravi is definitely a lot humble, and he's been that way all the time. So that's really where almost. I remember 8 years ago is when Ravi, you and I met on a mentorship program. But ever since then, we kept in touch, and it's super humbling to see your meteoric rise as well, because I'm humbled. I mean, I'm sure we can be mentors to many people, but I think it's always about give and take, right? We can only give as much as people are taking from mentors and advisors that way. So in that sense, again, all that I say is I'm super happy to be again talking to you again, and I'm sure let's dive into whatever we want to talk.
Yeah, and today it's not about product management. Okay, product management is past. Of course, product management plays such a central role in the decisions that we take, even as we build startups. But I want to go beyond that. I want to first of all know you're wearing so many hats today. Is it the most exciting phase of your life, if I were to ask you?
Yeah, I'll say this, right? When I've really started my career as a software engineer and real-time operating systems in the automotive industry, and every bit and byte made a lot of sense. It is a premium then, it is a premium now as well, right? Um, and not many people understand that, but that's okay. But then when we were really moving from the software real-time systems into much more of the product management, you can realize that not many people knew at that time. When I say at that time, it was almost 15 years back, right? Product management wasn't really a thing at that point of time. It is just that some people or engineers or salespeople who are business savvy and technology savvy, they made their careers as product managers. And that's really all about it. And there were no real mentorship aspect for product managers. And that's really one of the aspects where for me it really strikes to provide and give back to where the careers and the people that I have touched, and then a lot of people touched me as well from the mentorship and advisory aspect of it, and that's how we all grow in careers, right? So now fast forward, one thing that I've seen definitely is from the product management aspect of it, if we really see it on a macro level, it is really about saying you are building something and you need to make money out of what you built. That's really the fundamental um, outcome of product management,
Right.
right? You build something, you sell something, you need to make money to your company. That's really the end goal, right? Again, of course, I'm making it super simplistic, but that's the goal of any product manager at the end of the day, right? You don't want to just build something for the sake of building, because that's not helpful for anybody. It's not helpful for your company. It's not helpful for your end users in a way.
Right.
And now fast forward, what happened in my career is, as I went through several startup exits, some in the very mature stage, some in the very early stage, one thing I realized is very clear that we need to build the right products to the right market and the right users. And as simple as everybody talks about the same thing, for sure, it's not something new that I'm saying, but it is super, super hard to put in execution.
Mm.
Right. When I say right products, every time, I'm sure, and as a product manager or engineer, when I build something, I always say, oh, this is great product. Somehow it is not selling.
Right.
And that's the vacuum, right? When the moment you say something is not selling, then why did you build something?
Right.
Right. So the reason why I'm sort of really bringing in that context of product management is, now when you take that lesson and then apply it to startups, that's exactly what every startup is going through, right?
Right.
So there is a technical founder or a business founder, they saw a need, they saw a problem, they want to solve something, and then they're bringing in a lot of their energy and passion, and they are building the startup. And now everybody falls into the same chasm in a way, which is, I have something, the product, either number one, they didn't sell anything, that
Mm.
is one category of companies, or they sold to few customers and then they couldn't sell anything more. They are
So they
not
did
scaling,
not get mainstream success. They went to that chasm, okay, and
right?
they are not able to go.
Now, they are really looking for something.
Right.
The third category is, they are super successful in one segment, but they
Right.
are not able to break out of it, right?
Right.
Of course, the third category is where, at least if many founders are in, I'm sure, they will consider themselves successful. But the problematic categories are the first and second one, where there are zero sales, or they have few sales but
Right.
they are not able to expand, right?
Right.
So anyway, the reason why I'm giving you that context is, that's really where I felt there is a super big need for somebody to step in and then really talk through what is needed to make whatever products are done, to make them successful from the commercial ability point of view. And that's really where I've been spending a lot of my time in the last 6 years. And that's really where what I'm doing with Product 10x Accelerator or the P10x Ventures, and then really helping all the startups to get to the financial success.
Got it. So, as I said, this is going to be a little intense, and I usually do not like to stay only on the surface. I like to go deeper. I just want to know. Okay, so when you were up, you are still, I do not know, with Oracle. but how did you transition? How did you decide that you want to build product? And maybe if you can tell your formative story of how product 10x came into being. Like, did you have friends already? Did you brainstorm a lot? Did you see an opportunity? How did you make that transition?
Absolutely. That's a great question, by the way. Um, like any other founder, for us, it's like there is no straight line. I think
Right.
that seems to be fancy, but unfortunately that's not the case. um,
Always.
so we've all been in those situations where we over the weekends we meet with friends, and then you talk about, oh, I have a great idea. I mean, this is going to be the next $1 billion idea, and then you brainstorm, you think about it. Monday morning everybody forgets, and then they are on to their normal lives, right?
I thought it only happens with me that you get excited about an idea, but you sleep over and next day that idea fades.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're not alone, Ravi. I'm sure I can tell you that, right? But the reason why I'm mentioning that is that's exactly where there were a lot of ideas that I was thinking through, and to it was really time to make something happen. That's one. And the one aspect that where I really felt super comfortable was by the time around before we started product annex around 2017 time. But at that time it was really like helping startup founders to really look at what is there to help them with product strategy, because a lot of people don't even understand the difference between product management and product strategy, for example. And then helping them with pricing, and then helping them in recruiting the right leaders at the top level as leaders for the startups. So there were bunch of things that I have done personally over a period of 3-4 years. And then what happened really was I realized one thing, that a lot of advisors and mentors for the startups, when go in they go in with a very high level broad based approach, saying that, hey, in my previous company I did this, and you go figure out, you do it yourself and see if it works for you, right? So I always think of it like a top big consulting firms going into a big company and saying, hey, I give you this 10-point formula, you go figure it out, right?
Hmm.
But of course, I mean, it works for the enterprise companies because there is manpower resources, they can make it happen.
Right.
But think about it, as a startup, you don't really have too many resources. You really need somebody who understands, who's been there, done that, and who can understand your own context on what's happening.
Right.
And that's really where I felt the need to say, we want to help founders to really go from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. And what I specifically mean by that is, in the last 5-6 years there is a lot of focus that every company is putting on product led growth, clearly. And it is not to say at any point of time that sales is not important, but then you need to build the right products. I think that's really where when we talk about the product 10x, and that's exactly where we want to focus on product led growth that gives you 10x ROI from the startup's point of view.
Right. So
And that's really where we started product 10x.
yeah. So I again want to take you the precise moment where. So you said that at any given point of time you have multiple ideas. Okay. Okay. So you have these ideas. You're
Yep.
brainstorming with your friends. So you might have an idea to start something of your own, but instead you said, okay, I see an opportunity where there are these startups who are struggling without experience, and maybe we could start an ecosystem where we help other startups. How did that thing, I mean, were you already involved with startups? Like, were you active with startups? Were you talking with startups? How did that idea come in, instead of say, why don't I build a startup of my own?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So, um, again, this is not really like a aha moment, right? It
Right.
doesn't really happen that way, or it didn't really happen that way for me.
Right.
But it was really like for almost 3 years, I was helping almost 4 startups by the time. on a very regular basis, really helping them with the product, the technology aspect of it, and then really enabling them with the sales features. So
Like
that gave me one.
how did you find these four startups? You
So
like
they actually reached out
they reached
based
out to you.
on, yeah, on LinkedIn, basically, right? So LinkedIn definitely has been one of the force multiplier, if I can say, because I would love to kind of again, as part of my giving back to everyone that
Right.
are they're part of my network. I keep talking about, products and the technology and whatnot, and then I think in that probably kind of assimilated that interest on what I do, and then startups reached out to me, and
Got it.
then I started helping them. So at the end of 3 4 years, I think, I came to a point of decision making where at this time, should I have my own startup or should I start helping these startups
Mm,
more in a much deeper way? And I'll tell you, I think, that wasn't a really easy decision at all,
right.
because at the end of it, it came to one aspect, which is, do you want to create a startup or do you want to enable startups?
Right. Right.
That's really the decision point. And I'll tell you, I think at that point of time, because again, there are multiple like-minded people that came together. I have two partners, luckily, at this point of time when I started Product 10x, and one partner is too deep into business and partnerships in general in the startups and enterprise world. The other partner is has been an expert in AI, machine learning, and enterprise scale products. That's really where we came together. We said, hey, we've been doing different things in an independent capacity, but then why don't we just join forces and then bring Product 10x to life, right?
And
I'll tell you,
how did you find these partners? Were they your ex colleagues, friends? How did you
they
how
were
did
friends. They were
okay.
friends. Yeah, yeah. So that's, I think, again, the reason why I say friends is because at the end of the day, it is super difficult to work with completely net new people.
Mm,
I'll say that for sure. Because what happens is, it's like that frequency that has to match at the end of the day. It just doesn't really matter how great your idea is, how great your vision is. It is all about people, and that I can vouch by 100%. It doesn't really matter if it is for just Product NX, or I'm sure, Ravi, you've interacted with so many people, but it is at the end of the day, it's not about the individual greatness, but as a team, are you able to really scale? I think, that matters a lot. And that's really where I would say, for any founders out there, when you are thinking about a great idea, startup execution, um, it's really super important to find that right team that goes behind you, and just don't settle for anybody out there, because once you start something and once you have people, you don't want to be struggling to understand what other person is saying, but you are like, oh yeah, I mean, Ravi said so, I know what Ravi means, and then you just should be able to move forward rather than dragging your feet because you don't have a cohesive strategy within the team. So that's really where it is super important to understand. It need not be just friends, I mean, to be honest with you, right? Maybe it is professional network that you're managing for a long time. You know that person really well, and he or she really becomes a great business partner, and that's really how I would really think of really bringing in the team together.
got it. And when you say friends, they were friends for long. Like what is an average relationship length that you have had with them?
Yeah,
Like where?
definitely. So one partner, I've known him for about 13 years. The second
Mm.
partner that I have known him for about 5 years.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that's so true. Sometimes, most times, it is about it's about the relationship with whom you want to get this done. And if the relationship is very new, you do not know the person, and especially startup journey is so full of turbulence that if the bonding and if you do not understand each other, it can get rocky, many times. So I completely understand. Okay, and then you got together, and then all of you were in sync. Like, were they also in their regular corporate jobs, and they left their jobs and joined, or how was it?
No, so the business partner that I was talking about is a completely an entrepreneur on his own, and
Right.
then we were sort of, at this point. I mean, we had to really see at what point of time should we really leave our corporate jobs and join in. And I think that's really where we set out our own goals on what does it really mean. Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? And we've kind of understood that there is some minimal, of course, cash flow that is needed for everybody to make it happen. And all those things are like super open discussions, right? Because the reason why I'm saying you need to really understand each other is whether it is about, we are living in a world where everybody needs praise, but I think that's not really where fundamental relationships happen. But it is really all about, hey, what strategy are we looking at, what is the execution, and then if there is a critique, we want to really talk to each other in an open manner, and then make sure that we understand each other's perspective. I think that is super important. So that's really where, when I talk about the relationships matter and the partnerships matter, initially, when who you bring in, that's the critical phase, right? You should be able to talk even something that in your mind you are thinking, that's not really a great topic that I would like to discuss, but you should be able to discuss that right in the initial phases. For example, simple things. How much should every partner get from the equity standpoint of view, right? What is every person bringing in? Because at the end of the day, everybody thinks, I'm doing a great job, I'm bringing in so much value, but then there is always things that you need to think through, as to say, how much of expertise is somebody bringing in, how much of time commitment somebody is bringing in, how much of industry contacts and value that people are bringing in. And that's an open discussion, right? I mean, it is easy to say we are equal partners, but I'll tell you, nobody is equal from that point
This
of
is
view.
this is this
Everybody.
is such an this is such an important conversation, and I want to dig deeper. What are the guidelines? What are the rules of thumb? Of course, you are friends. Okay, there's such an important, such a sensitive topic as well, right? Delicate conversation. So so you said three partners or four partners?
Three partners.
Three partners. So when the three partners got together about this idea, so did you just come up with a say a dashboard, drawing board, and then they said, okay, Suresh, you are you are getting this value, and whoever the other partner B would, they are giving this value, and then you measure the contribution or expected contribution, and that's how you assign equity, or is it divided by three? How does it work out?
Yeah. So I think, let's talk through the kind of thought process, how it goes behind, right? I think that's what we have done for Product Connects. That's what we advise for even the startups that we bring into our portfolio, right?
Right,
Which is to say, it's all about the value exchange. I
right,
think, that's really where you should really start your discussion with, as to say, as a founder or as a co-founder or as a because it is very common that initially you start the company with 3-4 people, and then you add, let's say, two other people as co-founders. It's pretty common
right,
to happen, because you are really thinking at what is that white space that you want to fill in, and then maybe there are really good people that you found
right,
after 3, 4, 5 months of starting your company. So that's perfectly okay. But
right.
then the guideline that we need to really think through, the framework really, is to say how much of value that each and every person is bringing in. That's super important. And it's not just about what I say that is important, but what you are able to commit and do. So it's always super important to kind of first write down what I'm able to bring in to the table. That's very important. And then you should and you must try out every founder or co-founder for 3 months,
Hmm.
right? Because at the end of the day, it is super easy for me to say, oh, I'm able to bring you $10 million ARR. Sure, try them out for 3 months and then see even if they are able to bring in $1 million revenue for 3 months.
So how does this three
right?
months? How is the contract then? So 3 months they do not. They will only get equity after 3 months. Is that how it is?
So, I mean, I would say this, right? If you are pretty open about what your goals are and what you are trying to do,
Right.
people, I mean, whoever your co-founder is coming in, they should be able to willing to work with you for 3 months together and then show the result, bring the value, and then you talk about what that kind of next steps are going to be. Because uh, I try to avoid bringing in the contracts early on, because at the
Mm,
end of the day, it's really all about how we are working through as people. And from that angle, I really hate try to bring in contracts early on, right?
right.
But then once you start working with the people, I mean, the person in that sense, he or she, then you understand, yes, they are able to bring in value, you are able to understand who they are and they are able to understand who you are, and then you really expect a long term commitment from them. Then of course, I mean, you need to get into the whole discussion of how does it really translate that into equity, what is our current valuation, what is that you are trying to bring in, and all those discussions. So again, the net of that is, I would say, the framework that I really live on is what's the value exchange and what is the time commitment. And the time commitment is super easy, right? Sometimes people get um, illusioned by saying, oh, it's not about time, but it is about expertise.
Or value.
But
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
but the unfortunate truth over there is your expertise has to be combined with the time commitment.
Of course.
Otherwise there is no real value exchange that happens
Right.
out there,
Right.
right?
Right.
Value exchange, time commitment, and then the third step really is make sure that you work together for at least 3 months to really understand in a much more deeper level on how that whole relationship might look like when you
Mm.
go into the future. Again, I think there is no one single point formula for sure. There will always be discussions that you will need to be having. Sometimes you might increase the equity to your partner, sometimes based on their commitment it might decrease. That's all fine, but again, as I said, fundamentally you need to bring together the kind of people that understand each other, that are open to learning from each other, and that's
Right.
the only way you will be able to have open conversations.
Got it. So you need not share your own lessons. So you can keep that within yourself. But just hypothetically, there are two friends who brainstorm and then come up with an idea, and then they want to get started. Okay, and they get started, and they said, okay, let's make a 50-50, or say 60-40, because this was my idea. Let me take 60 and 40. And they're working on this. They're building on this, and on a fine day, they found another friend who came in, and he expressed his interest to join the team, and he said that this is my value, and I think I can add value. So how do you dilute that? So you break that 60-40 into, you reduce your own individual equity to accommodate him, or how does it work?
Yeah, that makes sense. So one thing that we always advise our own startups, and I think that's been an industry norm typically, as to say, when you're forming a company, we typically advise some shares to be set aside completely, right?
Okay.
Which is basically to say almost about 20% of a company shares we need to just set aside, and then it's only the rest of the 80% that should be divided between founders, for example,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And that too, so I'm sure there is a concept of vesting in general, and just because I'm a founder, just because let's say you are a founder, doesn't mean that you get your options or stocks vested the day one.
right.
And I think many people actually do it in a wrong way, saying that just because I'm a founder, all my options are vested at the day one. And I think that is the wrong way, because if you want to really go far and you want to do it the right way,
Mm,
typically you need to put it in the timeline, as to
right.
say every 1 year 25% of your allotted stocks would get vested, for
Right.
example, right? So I mean, just as an example, take this one where there are two co-founders, that the way you talked about, Ravi. and out of 8 million shares, each took 4 million shares, let's say,
Right.
right? 40%, 40%. And then the one, I think, guideline that we always give is make sure that the co-founders that are there, their options get vested over a period of 4 years, right?
Okay.
Every year, 25% of options get vested. So, which basically means out of 4 million shares that you have, 1 million shares get vested every year. And of course, I mean, there is a contingency, right? I mean, it's not that, I'm a co-founder, I don't do anything, but just because of the timeline, my um, options get vested. And that's
Yeah.
exactly where I think we pretty much advise everybody to have board of advisors
Right.
to every startup that they bring in,
Right.
because at the end of the day, it's super super important. I mean, board of directors are not needed,
Right.
but board of advisors are needed, so that at least you are able to get advice from somebody who's been there in the industry for a long time, who understands the value of what you are doing. And that's really where I think there is a right framework that we always advise the startups to start with.
Right. So you said 20, keep 20% aside for maybe your team or maybe any new founder that you want to include. But what if, so you say it's 40, 40, 80, and then 20 you keep aside for future. But what if you really have a founder who adds massive value? Would you go beyond that 20%, or you would break it down so that he accommodates within that 20%? How does it work out?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think most of the times what happens is when you are bringing in a new co-founder, let's say after 5-10 years. I mean, actually, Elon Musk is actually a great example for that, right? I mean, he wasn't really initial co-founder of Tesla at all, but then at a later stage he put in the money and then he became the co-founder of Tesla.
Right.
So when you think about it, of course, I mean, Tesla is probably one other extreme example, but otherwise in the normal startup that happens, when you're bringing in a new co-founder, we always advise for the current founders to dilute themselves rather than eating into the advisory shares.
Right.
Uh, think about it, right? Doing a startup is super hard, no
Right.
matter who you are, where you are, and how much of previous experiences that you have. It doesn't really matter even if you are a 10-time founder, but
Mm.
then the current company that you are startup that you are doing always brings in new challenges, right?
Right.
No matter what. So that's really where these 20% advisory shares or the employee shares that we are talking about, they really help you to bring new talent, whether it is about salespeople, your business development folks, or your customer success and engineering and all that. Especially these days, the talent is super super critical, and I think that's really where these shares really help you a lot. That's
Right.
one segment. The second segment is the whole of the advisory shares, because at the end of the day, you really need somebody. Let's say your startup is in the edtech,
Right.
and you really need the advisors out there who knows what are the sales cycles. They can give you some introductions into some great schools and whatnot, and that's really where it is super important to have them. And then the third category is investors, right? Initially, probably some of the investors who is putting in, let's say, $250,000, $500,000, whatever that is, and for them, you don't need to dilute the whole company for that,
Yeah.
but you
Right.
can actually provide some of these, shares to the investors as such. So that's really where, when you consider about it, this 20% of the shares that you have, it is always best to accommodate to the other help that you need, but then always make sure that the founders are just taking in from a fixed set of shares from that point of view.
Got it. So the board of advisors also get a portion of that 20%, right? So that's how it
That
is.
is correct. Yes.
Got it. Got it. Got it. And usually, if it's a board of advisor, what is what is a good proportion of the equity that they would want, and what is their commitment usually? Because you could put advisors, but these advisors have also they need to be valuable to you, right? So how do you bring them in, and how do you set expectations for their commitment to the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you this. I think Founder Institute actually provided what we call as the fast agreements. There is a nice expansion to that, but the idea is this. I think they actually clearly maintain the separation between the minimal commitment, medium commitment, and high commitment, and they really talk about. Uh, there is a guideline as to say if it is minimal, it is about 10 hours per month, and then if it is a lot, the timeline increases, and based on that you are awarded something like 0.25 percentage of points within a company, and all these are advisory shares right at that
Right.
point of time, and you provide that from this particular option pool that you have,
Right.
and fast agreements are by far the safest and the easiest way that you can bring on advisors, I would say.
Got it. So you're saying that there are these industry standards that you can look upon, and then also is it a binding contract saying that okay, you are coming in as an advisor, this is the percentage that you will get, and this is the whether it is a medium commitment or high commitment,
That is correct.
it's part of the contract. Is that how it is?
Yes, yes,
Got it.
yes, yes.
Got it. Okay, cool, excellent. Thank you. This was very helpful.
Thank
um,
you.
yeah, and then you got started with Product 10x, and then you registered it, and then you became partners, and you talked about cash flow. So how did you manage that cash flow? So say those of you who were new into this, did you continue with your jobs for cash flow, or did you what were the how were you managing your expenses when you started this?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I think, as a generic framework, we definitely advise everybody to sort of, keep some savings at the end of the day, because if you are too early in your career, what I mean by that is if somebody is fresh out of college, undergrad or grad, whatever that is, then of course, there aren't really too many expectations on your lifestyle and whatnot. I think, that needs to be considered seriously, right? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to just for the sake of your passion of doing something, you can't really have your lifestyle at stake,
Right.
in the sense of at a very minimum, you should be able to live comfortably,
Right.
even if you don't have, let's say, you're not going to a vacation every year, but you should live on your own. So from that point of view, we absolutely advise to have the savings that you can kind of tap into. That's
Right.
super important, right? Because especially in the stages that I'm sure we are in, there are these families and kids, and there are things needs to be taken care, and you don't really, anything can happen at any point of time. So
Right.
that's really where you need to have some, at least the minimal expectation on the savings that you can tap into. That's one. And
And the
number
savings
two.
and the savings should take care of your monthly expenses. That's how it is till the time the revenues kick
Correct.
in,
There is
or
a
you
break even.
decide to take salaries, right? So
That is
uh,
correct. Yep,
okay,
yep, yep.
okay, got it.
So I'll tell you, I think, for a long time, we didn't really take any salaries at all.
So what is the
Um,
guideline also? What is the rule of thumb? What are the guidelines? I'm sure there is no one standard guideline, but what is the best advice that you give to startups to draw salaries out at what time of your startups?
yeah. So there are two points over there, or rather two different categories, I would say, right? When one or multiple co-founders are starting a startup, we would always advise them initially for at least 1 year, execute, see the traction on how the things are going on, before they raise the money, right? And during this 1 year, of course, there is no revenue that is coming in. And we definitely advise them to individually, they need to just tap into their own savings and whatnot, to really get to a place where, yes, there is a product that is out there, and they are having some good traction in the marketplace and all that. But once they are bringing in a little bit of revenue, or they got some money out of the fundraise process and whatnot, that is the time where we definitely advise them to take or start drawing salaries. Because it's like this, right? At the end of the day, if I'm the founder, I am not looking, or if I'm always looking for, oh my goodness, how do I pay my monthly bills, and I'm really stressed about paying my monthly bills, then I can't focus on my startup. I think that is a very clear financial distinction that we have to make.
Okay.
So again, as I said, you don't need to have luxurious life per se, but then you should have the basics covered as part of the salary that you draw. So I think even with the investors, you should be we actually advise very clearly that they should be very upfront and focused on saying that out of the money that we're getting, we would like to take some salaries. And it is perfectly okay to say how much salary that each and every person is planning to draw. And then as long as there is a rationale behind it, I think, that's how you should definitely think through as well.
Okay, so again, you talked about lifestyle, you talked about whether or not it's luxury or not. It's very relative, right? So let's talk about a bootstrap business. So for the first 1 year, you are trying to build something of your own. You don't raise anything. First 1 year, you're trying to build from your own pockets. You have had savings. You have a couple of developers working on a prototype, and then you start getting some traction. A couple of customers validated this, and then you went ahead, and then you go and raise some money, and that money could be from say angel fund, or something of that sort. uh, and then you have this conversation at that time that, okay, say a quarter million somebody gives you, right? And that quarter million would survive you for the next say 6 months or so into product development and maybe some sales expenses. So at that time you should have this conversation that, hey, you know what, we got a quarter million, but we want to draw 50K as base salary for our survival. It is okay to have that conversation, right?
You must have that conversation.
Got it. Because I know some purists who say that, you know what, try to delay as much as possible your salaries from your startups, because that is the best way to show your commitment for your startups. Because if you start drawing too early, and that's the reason I asked you if there are any rules of thumb, but you are saying the opposite. You are saying that you should, if it takes the stress away, or if it is stressing you out on how to manage your life, then you should draw out, because that way you can focus on your business.
Absolutely.
And even
So
if the
again,
business even if the business is not making money, you are taking this money out of your from the money that you have raised, because that sometimes looks fundamentally wrong that you are drawing the salary from the money that you have raised, not from the revenues that you're generating. So maybe if you can just elaborate that a bit, that'll be
yeah,
helpful.
yeah, absolutely. So I'll say this, right? I think, not every founder or co-founder would be in the same stage of life that they are in, right? What I mean by that is, maybe there are some, they are super early in their career. There are some who are late, and they have family and commitments. So at the end of the day, one thing that we need to really look at is every co-founder, every employee should be focusing on just one thing, which is the startup success, right? So that's the outcome that we want. And now what we need to sort of, really come back to it is to say, okay, if I need to really put my 1,000% attention on something to make the startup successful, do I have the right financial framework for myself, right? And that's really where I do want and encourage everyone to make sure that they are financially stable to really focus on the startup. And when I say financially stable, it's really make sure that the basics are covered for everyone, right? And of course, my basics are different from your basics, but that is one open discussion that the founders need to have to say what that baseline means for everybody from that angle. And the second point to that, Ravi, is many times founders shy away thinking that, oh my goodness, if I take the money out of the money that I raise,
Yeah.
that's fundamentally wrong. But I
Yeah.
think, I completely disagree with that, because at the end of the day, as a co-founder, you are putting in your energy, sweat, and everything into the startup, and you are really pushing it forward, right?
Right.
So from that angle, it is perfectly the right thing to do to say, yes, I'm the one of the founders, or I'm the founder, and then to be able to push this startup forward, I'm taking some base salary,
Right.
and then that should definitely be the right thing to do, even from the investor's point of view, because we've done several investments in a way where the founders are drawing salaries, and we want them to draw salaries, because that's really in the interest of the investor as well. Because if you are the founder, and then every month you are really stretching yourself to have your basics meet, then there is a challenge, right? Because you are financially stressed, that means you are not focusing on the startup. That
Right.
means my ROI on this startup would be less, because you're not fully focused.
Got it. And when do you start taking more and more salaries? Okay, how do you decide what's the framework like? I mean, of course, that there's a point of time where you might succeed and you're gaining traction. When is the point where you decide that now the founders can take more salaries and make more money? Or is
Yeah.
it something that the equity should take care of it, and not the actual salaries? Because
So yeah,
the
that's a good
valuation
point,
would go
right?
up,
I
right?
mean, yeah. So at any point of time, typically when you are, by definition, when you are raising funds, most of the times I would say you are diluting your equity anyway,
Right.
by definition, right?
Right.
So there are times that we've seen when by the time a founder goes to series A, series B, they might end up in 5-6% of the total equity. They would have started with 80%, but they went all the way to 5-10%. That's it, right? But then again, that's not a bad thing at all, honestly, at the end
because,
of the day,
because the valuation has gone up.
because the value has also grown, has increased a lot. So think of
Mm.
it as 80% of $1 million when you started versus 5% of $1 billion is still a lot of value that somebody would have generated. So that's that with the equity part, right? The second
Mm.
part, with the salary part, that you really think through is to say, there are, I would say, commonly there are some industry standards where you say, okay, on a pre-seed, seed, series A, series B company stage, there are certain co-founder, we keep talking about the co-founder, but I would really think of it as a CEO, product officer, the revenue officer. I mean, whoever that co-founders are acting as, these salaries are more or less, I would say, defined by the market that they are operating in. So if somebody is taking a 50K pre-seed just because they really want to push the product forward and the startup forward, and then they are making, let's say, $2 million ARR, and then they got in a uh, 2 million funding with a $10 million valuation for say, at that point of time, I think it is perfectly fine for those co-founders to say, hey, we are taking 50K at this point of time, but can we increase that money to something else, right? Those are the kind of discussions that are totally legitimate, and you should have, because at the end of the day, it's really about, you are bringing in the value, and then you are showing the commitment without really having the financial distress.
Mm. Got it. Got it. Thank you. That was very, very valuable. So for you, so there was So when did you start getting traction for Product 10x? What was the business model? So you have a certain kind of startups you wanted to. So this was not this was not an investment fund, right? This was mostly about accelerating. What was How do you define Product 10x?
Yeah, definitely. So Product NX is a SaaS accelerator and co-creator, right? So what
Yeah,
we mean by that is, I'm sure everybody knows about the startup accelerators. I think that is
right.
a very clear thing. But from our point of view, we focus only on the SaaS business models and startups. That's number one. And what one thing that we have seen in the industry is,
But
um,
Suresh, tell me what kind of a startup is not a SaaS startup? Every startup today is a SaaS startup, no?
I'll tell you, you would think so, but not
Okay,
really, right? There are still hundreds and thousands of startups, even in the valley, that are not SaaS,
I see.
right?
Got it.
So I'm sure for many people, SaaS seems to be, how can a startup exist without SaaS?
Hmm.
But I think
It's
there are,
like, yeah, yeah, because
yeah.
that's the world they know. Okay,
Exactly,
okay.
exactly. That's one. But that's a great question, though, right? Because at the end of the day, we keep thinking about SaaS, because we are live and breathe SaaS. We think, everything else out there is SaaS. But then that's something that not well understood by many people,
Hmm.
right? That's one. And especially when we talk about the co-creation with Product NX, where we really help companies in the long term is be really there as the guide and part of the journey with the startup founders, and really help them in making them sales ready, marketing ready, fundraise ready, and help them recruit the right salespeople. I mean, for example, think about it as, if you are the founder and then you want to really bring in the right salesperson. Now the question would be, should you bring the VP of sales, or should you just bring in an SDR or a BDR, right?
Hmm.
So those are not easy decisions for anybody, because as a startup founder, you have thousand things to worry about, and then on the top of it, if you have uh, the one wrong decision will actually push you back 3 months at the very least, in terms of accelerating your startup. So those are the kind of things where we help the startup founders co-create their companies, and that's really who we are, right? As Product Annex, those co-creators, to really be there as their advisors and mentors in the long term.
So what is the contract like? I mean, do you get shares for this, or how does it work? How's the relationship working out?
So we typically work like any other accelerator, Ravi, which is, I mean, think of it as, Y Combinator's 500 startups of the world, where we bring startups into our program, and then there is the equity that we sort of take in, and that's kind of the way we preach, is the way we think of ourselves as, we are a startup of startups, right? Product Annex is a startup, and then we are building startups, and that's really where I think the value creation happens for us in the form of equity that we take from the startups.
Good. A good accelerator's reputation would be how many successful startups they have been able to build. Right? Is that a KPI or a benchmark?
Yeah. So the way we think of ourselves is, for example, Indus.ai is one startup that we advised and mentored. They actually exited last year to another public company. And that's a great validation point for us. I mean, and we are really looking forward. There are so many companies that are going from, when we started with them, they are probably about $3 to $5 million valuation, and now they are about $10 million valuation, just because of course the products and the revenue and the team that they are able to bring themselves with the help of Product Connects. And I think that's really where we are super happy for what we are able to bring in and do with startups.
Could you narrate the journey that you have had? I mean, when you began, was it difficult to attract startups, or now is it easier? Like, did you
Yeah,
have
definitely. I'll
failures?
say this, right? Like any other startup or a company, getting the first customer is the hardest part.
Mm.
right? No matter who you are, I mean, how much credibility that you have, in a way. And for us, that's been that way, right? I mean, the first customer, or rather the first startup that we brought in, was definitely, I mean, who are you, why do you exist, what's your philosophy? I think, there is a lot of self discovery that happens, honestly, even for us as well. And then once, I think, we went through that first cycle, second cycle, I'll tell you this, right? For any startup, the hardest thing is messaging, right? No matter what, who
Is
you
that
are.
is that is that so? I mean, why? I mean, I cannot imagine messaging would be the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
So I'll tell you, you think about, let's say, in whatever roles that we are in, you bring in two people, ask them to go talk to the same startup, talk about what your company does, and I can bet you that they both talk in a very different way on what their company does,
okay. So you see
right?
that as a consistent problem with startups.
Oh, everywhere, absolutely.
And
uh,
what is the reason? Because they have not understood what problem they're trying to solve, or what is the reason?
so I think, that's more of, how each and every one of us are wired, right? I mean, I don't think, I don't necessarily call it as a critique per se, but I think, let's say you come from a product background, I come from sales background, and somebody else comes from, let's say, fundraise or investment background. I'm sure, I think, how we understand the world, how we understand the value of something, is slightly different. And then as individuals, we're also very different on what kind of problems we focus on, and what features we focus on, what outcomes we are really thinking through, and that's really makes the messaging very, very different, right? And that's really where, at this point of time, we really make sure that even our startups actually bring in a common product on the startup messaging, and then everybody should know. I mean, if somebody asks you, hey, what does a particular company does, it doesn't really matter who in that company, but everybody should be able to bring you the same messaging at that point of time.
Got it. And what does it take to become an accelerator? I mean, other than say your own experience, like the accelerator that you had the shape of product 10x 4 years ago and today, is it different? Like, do you have a bigger team now, or what does it take?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'll say this. I think, especially for the any accelerator, the number one thing is, do you have the right people who've been there, done that?
Okay.
That's super important, right? I mean, especially because at the end of the day, if you are a startup founder, and then you really need the right people on board, and that's super important. And that's exactly where we make sure that the right team is formed. That's number one. And we consciously made a decision initially that, we don't want to expand super fast.
Mm,
That's been a very, very organic and deliberation that we had. And that really helped us to understand, for example, the three partners that we have. We really understood who we are, what we want to do. That really helped us. That's number one. Number two, once we knew that, yes, there is a consistent messaging that we were able to do, and we validated ourselves as to say, are we able to provide value? I think that's super important, right? Because one is to say there is a hypothesis on what I want to provide, but the second thing is to say, yes, I proved my hypothesis, right?
right.
Once we were able to do that, that's really when now, we brought in, great community leaders that are really working with multiple startup founders, and bringing in a lot of, webinars, and then startup founders, and then the executives from the kind of, enterprises, to really bring that value to startup founders. And we also have, we've been super lucky to say, within our network there are so many executives and influencers who are able to support us all along, and that really helped us. So again, there is no one single point formula for a startup accelerator in general, but I think it's really super important for any accelerator to be able to have the right set of people who worked in startups, who scale startups, and who been a founder. Especially, I think that is super important, right? To be able to empathize with what founders are going through.
Right.
That's really where I would say.
So, my question is, just as advisors have this, you mentioned about minimum commitment, medium commitment, and most commitment. I mean, there is a risk that when an accelerator is managing my startup, I can just put my hands up and go to them for every little problem. Okay, so I mean that could happen, right? So at what point, or how do you? What is the boundary line where you say that, you know what, I'm becoming over dependent, and where do you also feel that, hey, you know what, you are the founder, you should you do your job. We are here to only advise you. What is that kind of a relationship? Could you explain that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely define who we are and who we are not, right?
Mm,
At the end of the day, and sometimes it's super easy to define who we are not. For example, we are not your execution team.
mm,
That's the fundamental thing that we always talk about, right? We are your strategy team, but we are not your execution team. So that actually defines a lot of boundaries from that point of view.
mm.
But at the same time, I'll say this, right? While I'm saying that we are not your execution team, but if we see that there is some kind of execution that is probably can be refined or can be made more efficient, of course, we will go and help them to define the right things over there. But by definition, we are not really executing anything for startups. It's really for the founder and the founding team to really take the right advice, think through the right strategy, and then go from there. But otherwise, that's really how we would like to sort of contain that time and expertise commitment.
Got it. And how do you? So you said you wanted to deliberately keep it small, but and you wanted to keep it in SaaS. But is there a particular industry SaaS, or do you broaden anything and everything?
Great question. So, from Product 10x point of view, we focus on four industries, I would say. The first one is education tech, health tech, HR tech, and then the last one is what we call as the productivity and collaboration.
And how did you arrive at these four verticals?
So, I'll tell you, I think, we also went through our own lessons in a way, like any other startup. Initially, we had very broad aspect of who we can advise and who we can help. But then it really became very evident that it's easy to say we can help any startup, any SaaS startup, but it is not really easy to make influence and make an impact, right? Because think about it. There might be a gaming startup that is in SaaS, but then we have no experience in gaming on how to scale, how to take it to the market, what are the right marketing mechanisms that we can use to really scale those gaming companies. So one thing we decided after a couple of years is basically we need to stick to our core. The founders, we have our team. We are super good at these four industries, so we basically just stick to these four industries.
Got it. Got it. And there is no dearth of startups in these industries, right? You'll never run out of startups in these industries. How do you pick startups? So you talked about industries, but then so is this a phase of your company where startups are coming organically, or do you also have to hunt from your end?
So there is a bunch of inbound and outbound that happens clearly for us, but from startups point of view, we really do we really pick three things, right? One is the team, the founding team,
Hmm.
right? At the end of the day, um,
What does it mean? So how do you decide a good founding team?
yeah. So what we really look at is the from the founding team point of view, is it a single founder or multiple founders? And if it is a single founder, I mean, if it is multiple founders, we feel a little more comfortable compared to a single founder. just from the point of view that, again, as I said, the startup journey is super hard. There are definitely some exceptions where even the single founders were really able to make it happen, but otherwise, multiple founders, definitely they have the right support system. We assume that they have the right support system. They are able to push each other, they are able to come to conclusions and whatnot. And then when especially the things go down, in every day is a very different day for startup founders, and we want the startup founding team to be self-sustainable, to really have that emotional support in that sense,
Right.
right? That's, I mean, again, the founding team, when we talk about it, we really think of it as, are they kind of really fresh out of college? That is one segment that we really look at. In that case, definitely there is a lot of drive and enthusiasm, and they want to make things happen, so that's great. And the second aspect really is, there are founders who've been industry veterans in a way. I mean, somebody who would have worked for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they would have seen some white space in the industry that they have worked in, and then they are really trying to solve that problem, right? In that case, that's a great area to be in as well, right? So that's really where the founders really become a super important part in decision making process. That's one. Number two is the opportunity angle, right? When we say opportunity angle, it's really to think through and say, sometimes it's super easy to be illusioned by saying that, oh my goodness, this is a problem that I face, so I want to solve this problem because this is a problem for me. You would automatically assume that this is a problem for millions of people out there, right?
Right.
But I mean, in reality, of course, we all know that is not true. But then there are still many founders who actually take that approach, as to say, if this is a problem for me, this is a problem for everyone, kind of thing, right?
Right.
So again, the reason I'm talking about specifically opportunity is, when you are spending your time, and then there are with the help of P10X ventures that we have, we also fund startups in that sense. So if we are spending our time and money on some startups, we want to make sure, of course, the opportunity is bigger for everyone, and that is a super important and critical thing for us, right?
Right. So you talked about two kinds of founders: fresh out of college, industry, and you said fresh out of college are more driven and motivated. Do you think industry veterans are not that? I mean, what has been your experience? Like, do you see the drive missing in somebody who is like 40 years old and already 20 years of
Yeah,
industry?
yeah, yeah. So just to make sure, I mean, when I talk about the college, the college grads, or some of the professionals who are super early in their career, when they build startups, when I talk about high drive and all that, it is simply means to say that sometimes when you don't know problems, it is much easy for somebody to kind of overcome those problems, compared to if you already know that there is a problem, then
Right.
your tendency to go around that is like, oh, you know what, that is a regulation legislation problem, why should I deal with it, kind
Got
of
it.
thing, right?
Yeah.
uh,
Curse of knowledge. They say the curse of knowledge, no?
exactly.
Because you
Yeah,
have
yeah, yeah.
knowledge, you have too much knowledge, and somebody who's a fresher, since he does not know how the world functions, he just goes and tries everything. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
I understand what you're trying to say.
So
Yeah.
again, I think one of the famous example that I really love is, for example, when the Square company with Jack Dorsey has come in, he actually brought in people who had absolutely no idea about fintech,
Mm.
a lot of them, right? Now it's really like saying, you are given a problem, how do you solve it, rather than if I know too many problems out there in the fintech, then for every solution I will come back and say, oh, you know what, there are all these government regulations and we may not be able to do something. Or if it is so easy, somebody would have already done that, right? But it's really about, I think, sometimes you need that fresh pair of eyes to really look into the problem. And that's really where some of these early in the career and fresh out of undergrad phase of life, they are able to really better understand that angle.
Right. You talked about opportunity. So you said that some founders might think that their own problem is also the problem of the world. How do you gauge opportunity? Whether an opportunity is big enough? Do you look for scale? Do you see that if the opportunity space is big, or are you also okay for small market niche problems? How do you gauge that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are always these trends that we definitely keep track of. When I say that trends, um, at this point of time in the last 5 6 years, there is a lot of need in general that is happening on, let's say, edtech, right?
Mm.
There is a lot of courses, for example, Udemy, Coursera kind of companies disrupted the way how the whole education is really seen in general. Khan Academy, for example, is a huge disruptor on their own. So there are some trends that we definitely keep track of, really looking at, what is the possibility of expansion within that market. That's number one. And we don't necessarily shy away from niche, because sometimes when you think about niche, niche also gives you the opportunity to really um, execute high value chain, right?
Mm.
Because if there are too many competitors out there, then it's super difficult for you to extract the value from
Mm.
the financial standpoint. But then if you are super niche, then you might be able to extract more value financially. So there are ways that we definitely look at, what is that right trend and right market. But I would say the opportunity size is definitely important for us.
Got it. Got it. So it's the team. You prefer multiple founders. You look for drive and you look for opportunity, and niche is also okay with you. Anything else that is important before you
Yes,
consider?
definitely. The third thing, most important thing as well for us is the ability to execute,
Hmm.
right? Um, it can be, it can be great founders, it can be, great opportunity or the industry that the startup is in. But then we always look for what is it that really gives us some early indicators to say that they are able to execute well, right? Some other things, could be that they've brought in a good amount of advisors. They are saying, hey, you know what we know, but we don't know many things. And then we brought in some advisors who can give us that wisdom, right? That could be one thing. The second thing is they are giving you all the lessons learned in whatever execution that they have done so far, right? They would have said, hey, initially we did this, we got some contractors and we realized that the contractors are properly is not working out for us. And then after that, we got we hired two developers directly within our thing, and then now it is at a stable state. So it's really the aspect of saying, I'm going to try out, and then I'm also trying to learn on what I try. And if something is not working out, I'm not afraid to say it is not working out and then move on to something else.
Got it. So you look for past evidence of execution also, if they have
That
what.
is correct. Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Because there's no way for a new founder to show execution. They have to have the benefit
Absolutely.
of time
Yeah,
before
yeah. So that's exactly the point, Ravi, where I was saying, if somebody is, just coming out of college, and they don't have too much of experience, but at least I'm sure they would have probably had the right advisors
Mm,
that are there with them.
right.
And that's really where we think of, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should have experienced people or industry veterans in your founding team, but
Right.
at least are you associating yourself, are you surrounding yourself with the right set of people is super important.
Got it. Excellent. And you mentioned about P10X ventures. So are you have also have you shifted also into funding? uh,
That
pursue?
is correct. So one thing we definitely realized in our past 3 years is when we help these companies from seed and pre-seed to get to the next level, all the way to Series A and all that. Definitely, I mean, one thing for sure is money doesn't solve all the problems. That is very clear, and that should be very clear for the founders as well. Because at the end of the day, everybody should just think one thing, right? If somebody gives you $2 million today, how do you want to use your money? That's number one. And what is the impact that to this $2 million is going to make for your company? And that's super important, right? And not many people have that clarity. I'll say that for sure. And from that angle, but what we realized is, as the companies are growing from sales point of view and the R&D point of view, they definitely need financial help. And one thing we realized, after helping almost 16 startups that are in our portfolio, is financial investment is also one pillar that we would like to help our startups with. So that's really where we started the Product 10x Ventures Fund. Um, and of course, we are still in the raising state at this point of time. We have some commitments, but it is about a $10 million fund we are looking for.
So so help me understand what is the source of your money? Because if you are a VC, if you are a fund yourself, you must be pulling in from somewhere else, right?
That is correct. So it is very natural I mean, of course, in the VC world, where you go to the limited partners, there are LPs, there are university endowments, and there are what we call as the HNIs, high net worth individuals, where based on, of course, our past record of what we did with the Product 10x Accelerator and all that, we are actually getting a great traction and understanding from LPs, and that's how we are raising money at this point of time.
Ah, got it. So you have a pool of people, and then you pull that money, and that becomes a fund, and then you okay,
Correct.
yeah. So I've seen some entrepreneurs, some podcasters. They have started rolling fund. You understand the concept of rolling fund? What is a rolling fund? If you could explain, if you
Yeah,
understand.
sure. So AngelList is super savvy with rolling fund. The whole concept really is, um, instead of just raising one big pool of money at a single point of time, rolling fund, basically you do it on a quarterly basis based on the need and the startups that you want to work with, right?
Help me
So
understand. So say there is with the startup, you want to work with or you want to fund,
you want to fund,
right?
want to work with. For me, it's always like, as an investor, you're always partnering with the startup.
Partnering.
So
Okay.
that's really where. So I mean, as a simple example, right, let's say if there is a micro VC fund that wants to raise $10 million, typically the traditional funds have always been, you just raise fund completely $10 million, and then you keep investing that until, let's say, the fund is exhausted and all that. But then in the case of rolling funds, you don't need to raise all the money at the same time, right? uh, this quarter you can raise, let's say, 250K from somebody, and then you can invest in something, and then next quarter you can again start raising from somebody who is there on LP base or angel list, and then they will be contributing on a regular basis, right? So the industry, there are multiple what do you call as aspects that keep happening. I'm not a big fan of rolling funds in general, because as a general partner, I'm always trying to raise money every quarter, and I think that's really a huge burden on GPs typically.
Got it. Got it. And when say for example, when should a company start raising money? You talked about pre-seed to seed. Okay. There could be a startup which is bootstrapped. Okay. When do you think they should be raising money? At what stage? Like, could you explain the pre-seed to seed to angel to VC, maybe those few of those stages, that will be helpful.
Yeah. So typically, I think what happens is pre-seed is where we are saying there is a great idea, and then um, there is a product or vision, and I'm just putting in $20,000, $50,000 just to really, make a prototype of whatever idea that I have, and then see if something really sticks together in the market. Maybe, you want to take it to 5, 6 prospects, show it to them, does it make sense? At the pre-seed stage, you may not even have any customers,
Hmm.
right? But then you exist as a startup and a product, and then you really want to get to the next level. And then at the seed stage, you
But
would typically,
pre-seed, why would you want to raise? You would not want to raise it, right? You would want to have it
at the
from your own
pre-seed,
money.
yeah. At the pre-seed, typically it's about, you have money, you put in, you bootstrap. That's really all it is, right?
But
Um,
are there people who also put in money in pre-seed? Do you see this as a norm?
yes,
No.
definitely.
So at the idea, nothing is there. Just at the idea stage, because the founder has a reputation, you just want to put the money on his idea.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly. Yeah,
got
yeah. So I'll say this. I think, in the industry, there is no proper standard or a guideline, right? Unfortunately, I would say there are times where we see, even during the pre-seed stages, people would have raised $500,000, or they would have raised $2 million. But then when you really see, there are some companies at the Series A level that are raising $2 million and still calling it as a Series A, right?
it.
So I think, it really depends on the VC that you are working with, the lead VC especially, and then the contractual terms that the startups is going with. But by the time somebody comes to pre-seed to seed, and then seed to Series A, you would definitely expect, a bunch of customers that you are getting, and at least, about a $1 million ARR between pre-seed to seed, and then maybe a couple of million ARR between seed to Series A angle.
Got it. But it would be unwise to raise money at the pre-seed or seed level, because hey, come on, you could put your own money and increase the valuation, show some traction, and then get the money in a higher valuation. No, would that not be wise?
So that's the conventional wisdom for sure, Ravi. But I think, what happens is, as a founder, you have limited money. Clearly, I mean, for anybody, there is only a little bit of amount that you can keep without digging into your own financial resources, and you need talent, you need engineers, you need salespeople, you need marketing, to really get the awareness out there. So if you need to really fund all these, different talent that you need to make this startup successful, then you need funding, right? That's really where, again, there are some startups that really take that journey as to say, I want to really bootstrap and then really go all the way. And there are some, for whatever reasons, I mean, the reasons could be very different for every founder, and they just decide to raise money and dilute in the initial stages itself.
Got it. So I interview a lot of people. I've interviewed some bootstrap entrepreneurs as well. I interviewed a very popular dating app, Quack Quack, which is India's number one dating app. They in fact beat Tinder in India. Tinder is not able to compete with them. He's a good friend of mine, but last 10 years he just focused on building this, and today many millions of users, paid users actually. So he is very protective about giving any equity out, and he focused. He did not. He grew. I mean, why do you raise funds to scale fast, right? But he did it slowly and steadily, and today he owns the entire company without giving away any equity. So what I hear when I talk to different people, including you, is there's no one way. Okay, it is completely depending on.
Yeah. So I'll say this. I think, I would say that's more of an exception than norm.
Yeah.
That, somebody is not giving the equity and then they own completely, and they were able to scale in the long term. For example, I think, Mailchimp is a great example, right? I mean, Mailchimp never did anything from the investors, but they did a pretty good exit. on their own. But then, is it possible for every founder and startup to do? I would say no.
Mm.
Unfortunately, I think, as everybody, sort of, just finds their own way of how to survive in the market. I think that's really important.
Got it. And also, when you raise money from good partners, you are getting a lot of help, not just money. You are getting network and stuff like that. So you're actually building your protective cover. You are insulating yourself from
Absolutely.
uh, from failure and stuff like that, right? So okay, so the question of raising money, when to raise money, is answered. What else did I have? I think these are good. So you talked about pooling money, and what stage is the Peter Next Ventures today?
Yeah, so for us, we invest only in the pre-seed and seed stage startups. I think, that's really where our focus is, and because of our product 10x accelerator, we feel that is the right place that we can actually provide the value.
Got it. Got it. Yes. One important question I forgot to ask you. So there is an individual who has a job and he has this powerful idea, just that he cannot jump into this idea because he has to maintain his family. So is it okay to raise fund so that he can get rid of his job and pay himself from the money that is raised and build upon this idea if he has a really good idea?
Again, I think, things differ from case to case. I think, if somebody is super passionate about, what they are trying to do, and then there is the right opportunity, I would say no, absolutely.
Absolutely right. So I mean that should not stop him thinking that, oh, first I need to have enough savings, because to have that enough savings he has to waste another say 5 years. Okay. Instead he has a very powerful idea and he has the credibility. Instead he could go to fundraise and say that this is my financial situation and I'm raising funds so that I can get rid of my job and work on this idea for the next 1 year. And
Absolutely.
that is a good conversation to have. Excellent. And you also are a founder of Sales Table. I'm also being mindful of your time here, and I think we should wrap it up in the next five minutes. You are a co-founder of Sales Table AI. Do you want to shed some more light? What's that?
Yeah, so I'll be, I think, I need to drop in a few minutes, but I think I'll just say a few things, right? So, one thing that we've seen again and again, especially in the SMB and startup segment, is there is a lot of salespeople churn out. Salespeople are notorious for churn out. I mean, they come in, they see, and then if they like, they don't like, they just sort of, move on to a different company. And the challenge over there that happens really out there is it's super difficult for the founders to really keep training the salespeople who is coming in. And it's not just about the training; they need to onboard the salespeople, train, and then the number of top level funnel leads that salespeople are bringing. How are you converting? What kind of messaging are you providing? So there is a lot of sales enablement and sales training that any founder does, and what we wanted to do with the salestable.ai is to completely automate that whole end-to-end sales enablement process, all the way from recruiting salespeople, uh, onboarding salespeople, training salespeople, and then really giving them the right tools to track their own progress at the end of the day. So
Got it.
that's really what is salestable.ai. And then at this point of time, we have about 30 customers. We are super excited about
Wow.
how everything is going towards. And we really feel this is a great opportunity for any startup and SMB out there to really come in and try Sales Table to really increase their sales effectiveness and revenue generation.
Excellent. Well, this brings us to the interesting conversation. Very, very valuable, high impact conversation with Suresh. Thank you, Suresh. Again, love this second time over, and I would love to have you third time very soon. But thanks. I was not aware. I just lost track of time because I was so engaged. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch.
No, absolutely, Ravi. I'll say this. I think, there are so many discussions. We have much deeper conversations, and this is one of such. And I'm always looking forward to really get deeper into these discussions and provide my own inputs. And thanks a lot for having me today.
Thank you, Suresh. You have a good rest of the day. Bye bye.
Thank you. Yeah.